Hey everyone, it's Casual Monday here on After Party because our guest Mark Halperin is where else? At the gym. It's where he does his best work, and I decided not to do any hair or makeup and just put a baseball hat on. So with your permission, we will continue the show anyway. We will plow forward like the intrepid journalists that we are. We're going to get to Mark in just one moment. Before we do, big show tonight. The news keeps rolling in because guess what? The midterm cycle is basically here. Jasmine Crockett has jumped into the Democratic primary race down in Texas, where Democrats are hoping to unseat John Cornyn, who's hardly the most popular man in Texas, but I bet he'll be a little bit more popular than Jasmine Crockett. Just my hunch. New comments from Jennifer Welch of I've Had It, laying into Erika Kirk. She used the G word, called Erika Kirk a grifter. We'll have some reaction to that. Marjorie Taylor Greene was on 60 Minutes, and Jimmy Kimmel actually has an extension. Show is not ending until 2027, according to news that just broke today, and a new Tish Hyman video, this time with Khanna. So this is a really interesting video because Khanna is one of the Democrats who's trying to help the party and had a little bit of a rough go of it in this confrontation with Tish Hyman in California at a town hall. First, before we get into the show, please make sure to subscribe. It helps us so much. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. That's where we put all of our happy hour episodes where I talk to you via the questions that you send in. So if you're not subscribed over on the podcast side, please do that. I'll also be debating with Ryan Grimm, some of the libertarians over at Reason, on big tech. So if you're in the DC area, come out and see us Wednesday night. You can get tickets. They're on my X feed or on the Reason website. Finally, just want to give a shout out to my friend Al's mom and her wonderful friend I met at Al's wedding over the weekend. They're big viewers of the show and big fans of Megan, which is always fun to talk to people in the wild, in the wilderness, who watch the show, and you never miss a Megyn Kelly show. So shout out to them. It was great to see you over the weekend. All right, without further ado, let's go ahead and bring in Mark Halperin, who's of course editor-in-chief of Two Way and host of Next Up with Mark Halperin on where else? Megyn Kelly's MK Media. And Mark, where else is at the gym wearing Cubs gear? What are you doing?
It's Cubs gear, but it's also this is a Japanese artist, very famous Japanese artist on this side. You know this Murakami? Are you familiar with Murakami?
Yes.
Little Murakami Cubs. What do you call those things? Collabs. Mashup collabs.
Collabs.
So it's a Japanese company, and they do these things, and I overbuy. So I'm not even a Cubs fan, but I own or a Dodgers fan, but I own a lot of Cubs and Dodgers Murakami gear, and I'm unveiling this one tonight for the first time. It's kind of a world exclusive premiere on the after party.
Yeah, it's like being on the runway, basically.
Ask me who I'm wearing, I'll say Murakami and Ryan Sandberg.
Time's right too, yeah. All right. I'm really glad we have you here tonight, Mark, because I'm fascinated by the dynamics this Texas Senate race is turning into. This is promising to be, I think, one of the most interesting political contests of maybe the entire decade, both the primary and the general election. And that sounds crazy, but today Jasmine Crockett did what everyone expected her to do, at least in the last 48 or so hours, and formally entered the Texas Senate race, pushing out Colin Allred, who people may remember from the Cruz race just a couple of years ago. So I want to go ahead and start here with Jasmine Crockett's campaign announcement video. This is F4.
How about this new one they have? Their new star, Crockett. How about
if you're listening to this, it's just a video of Crockett looking into the distance.
Party, Jasmine Crockett. They're in big trouble.
But you have this woman, Crockett. She's a very low IQ person.
I watched her speak the other day. She's definitely a low IQ person.
Crockett. Oh, man.
She's a very low IQ person.
Somebody said the other day she's one of the leaders of the party. I said, you got to be kidding.
Now they're going to rely on Crockett. Crockett's going to bring them back.
So again, for the visual, the way that ended was with flashbulbs and Jasmine Crockett dressed in all black crossing her arms. It was the same shot of Crockett the entire way through. Very artsy, Mark. What do you make of Jasmine Crockett entering this race?
First of all, despite your extraordinary powers of description, you were not able to do that video justice because it's bizarro. Emily, a Democrat has not won a statewide office in Texas for over a quarter century. And if you're asking me if Jasmine Crockett will be the Democrat who breaks that streak, the answer is no. Maybe she'll be the nominee, and if she is, the Republicans will rejoice because any of the three Republicans in the Republican primary can beat her, almost certainly. Because again, there's a profile that's been bandied about for years of the kind of Democrat who could break this 35 or whatever it is, 31-year losing streak to win a statewide office in Texas, and that profile matches not at all with that of Jasmine Crockett.
Well, in some ways, I feel like I'm more interested in this primary matchup than I even am in the general for all of the reasons that you just laid out. And I actually found more video here of Crockett recently. This is just the last couple of hours, I think, formal announcement video. So let's take a listen. When Texas turns blue, she says,
because of any one candidate, but because of each and every one of you doing your part. Turning Texas blue is what I want to talk to y'all about today. Now, there are those that say, ain't no way, we done tried it 50 kinds of ways. Let me be clear, y'all ain't never tried it the JC way. We used to telling us what I can't do, but they have no idea what Crockett's crew will do. So I just want to be clear, for all the haters in the back, listen up real loud.
That's for you, Mark.
We're going to get this thing done.
I'm a lover, not a hater.
All right. So, obvious cynicism on behalf of Democrats in Texas aside, what does it do for Democrats in 2026? Now that people feel like Trump sort of took Zohran Mamdani off the table, he'll still be used in races in red districts, red states, purple areas as well. But Crockett, I wonder if that's an even more powerful person to tie different Democrats to than Mamdani. I
mean, look, she'll be used by the president and by others, whether she runs or not, whether she's the nominee or not. But she's very liberal. She's very undisciplined as a campaign, force. She's the one who famously said that Lee Zeldin had received a campaign contribution from Jeffrey Epstein, and when it was determined it was Dr. Jeffrey Epstein, a totally different guy, she said, "I didn't say he'd received a campaign donation from the Jeffrey Epstein. I said a Jeffrey Epstein." So I mean, she's not a figure who Democrats want to see succeed for the nomination for most Democrats, because she's got no chance to win a general by the calculations of most people I know. On the other hand, she'll be used either way. And on the other hand, I don't think any of the Democrats who are talked about running or are still running are going to win this seat in this general election unless the Republicans nominate Attorney General Paxton. He might be vulnerable in a general, but I don't believe he'd be vulnerable to her. And I had somebody send me an email today, or a text really, said, best day of Ken Paxton's life in a long time, because now his opponents can't use the electability argument to say he shouldn't be the nominee because his electability over Jasmine Crockett, most Republicans think, is preordained.
So actually that's a good point, because I've just sort of been assuming Paxton he's not going to cut it in this race, but that is a heavy assumption. So what is your sense of the GOP side right now?
I still think the president's going to endorse the incumbent, John Cornyn. He's not a MAGA favorite, but he's done a lot to ingratiate himself with the president, including hiring as his consultants some of the president's top political advisors. And I think in the end, Republicans don't want to worry about this race. And if Paxton's the nominee, they'll have to worry about it. They probably won't lose it, but they'd have to worry about it. They just want to bank it. And if Paxton's the nominee, he's going to be reelected. So my spidey sense all along has been the president, despite his close ties with Paxton, will eventually endorse John Cornyn, and he'll win the nomination and win the general.
Well, back to the Dem primary, I want to ask about, you might not like this, Mark, James Tallarico, who I refer to as Timu Richie Cunningham, who, this is a clip I want to play, is sort of, it's a clip that I think does a good job at capturing what Tallarico, what his appeal Democratic consultants want to frame as his appeal, I guess is a kind of clumsy way of putting it, but people may remember it went on Joe Rogan. He had that back and forth about the Ten Commandments in the classroom. I think he went to seminary, and here's a little snippet from Tallarico on a podcast recently.
My granddad was a Baptist preacher in South Texas, and he told me when I was real little that we follow a barefoot rabbi. That's how he called it. And that barefoot rabbi gave us 2 commandments: love God and love neighbor. Because there is no love of God without love of neighbor, is how he put it. And my church, when I was growing up, always really emphasized our love for our neighbors, the need to take our faith from the sanctuary to the streets, to act, right? In the same way that labor organizers put their faith into action, the way civil rights marchers put their faith into action, the way farm workers put their faith into action. That was always the emphasis, which it's no wonder I went into public service, first as a public school teacher and then as a public official. It's all motivated by that commandment to love my neighbor as myself. I try to love my neighbor through public policy.
All right, Mark, what do you make of that?
On the one hand, I get what all the fuss is about. On the other hand, I don't get what all the fuss is about. If you take him on paper,
right,
he's a very compelling figure for the Democrats, a young, dynamic, progressive of faith who can talk the owls down from the trees and looks purty and seems to combine steel and softness. On the other hand, it's a subjective thing. I just think his capacity to, again, break the Democrats' 30-year losing streak in Texas, I don't think it's quite there based on his appeal and what I think is a press corps that's fallen overly in love with him.
Yeah, he reminds me a bit of like MJ Hagar and some of those other candidates. His ads have been fantastic, and they're taking stuff that works on paper and hoping that he's able to carry that message. But the reason I'm fascinated by this primary is that you have the Crockett figure who represents, she's not an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez Democratic Socialist. I mean, actually, Tallarico on policy stuff, I'll be curious to see how this shakes out, because he might have a case for being more Bernie aligned than Crockett does when it comes out in the wash. But she's the sort of Jennifer Welch candidate. We're going to talk about Welch in just one moment, but the anti-norms Democratic candidate. He is the restore the norms Democratic candidate with a sort of Bernie policy flair. So it's a weird dynamic.
Well said. Well said. I mean, I want to see sort of how they do when they start to engage with each other. How they draw the contrast, how much attention is focused on them as combatants. It'll be interesting to see. But again, I think you're going to find, for all the kind of bright, shiny object nature of the two of them, that it's going to be hard for either of them to win the general election.
All right, I have a lot more to get through with Mark Halperin tonight. But first, over the years, I have been clear about this. I'm not just pro-birth, I'm pro-life, and being pro-life means standing with mothers not only before their baby is born, but long after. And that is exactly why I partner so proudly with Preborn. Preborn does not just save babies, they make motherhood abundantly possible. They provide free ultrasounds and share the truth of the gospel with women in crisis, and then they stay with real practical help, including financial support for up to 2 years after the baby is born. This is what true Christ-centered compassion looks like, not just for the baby, but for the mother too. And here's where you can make a difference. Just $28 provides a free life-saving ultrasound, one chance for a mother to see her baby. And when she does, get this, she is twice as likely to choose life. How amazing is that? Preborn is trying to save, speaking of amazing, 70,000 babies this year. So don't just say you're pro-life. Live it. Be a part of saving 70,000 babies this year. Help save those babies and support mothers today. Go to preborn.com/Emily or call 855-601-2229. That's preborn.com/Emily. All right, we're back now with Mark Halperin, who's, of course, editor-in-chief of Two-Way and host of Next Up with Mark Halperin on Megyn Kelly's MK Media, our MK Media neighbors. So we have to get Mark Halperin's take on the New York Times' splashy profile of Jennifer Welch, host of the I've Had It podcast. We've talked about her a couple of times. We can put F2 up on the screen. This was a fairly uncritical profile that I think brought out some interesting notes in Jennifer Welch without devoting much skepticism or criticism at all to some of the obvious moral, political flaws that Jennifer Welch brings to the table, like this one. Let's go ahead and roll S2. Jennifer Welch talking about Charlie Kirk's grieving widow, Erika Kirk.
She is a grifter, and just look at the costume changes. Look at the costume changes. Look at the affect and how she does that. It's wild. This woman should be kicked to the curb. She is an absolute grifter, just like Donald Trump and just like her unrepentant, racist, homophobic husband was.
So Welch has, of course, also referred to Charlie Kirk after his assassination as a, quote, piece of shit. And those comments came after Erika Kirk was talking about her position on government entitlement programs at the New York Times Deal Book Summit. Hardly controversial, hardly the type of stuff that would make somebody of pure heart go after the grieving widow of a slain political target. Mark, what do you think?
I don't get that lady. First of all, I don't think it's a Deal Book Summit unless you're invited. That's just my general attitude. It's one of the main, it's a big grievance of people on the right, as you know, that places like the New York Times write fawning profiles of people on the left, and in this case of a lady who, even before her latest outburst about Erika Kirk, she's not very well-mannered, she's not very polite, she's a big potty mouth. And, the New York Times wants politics to be more genteel, wants there to be less negativity. They don't like the president's use of negative stuff. And this lady is second to none in saying things about people that are mean-spirited and gross. And she's entitled to her First Amendment rights, but I don't know that she's entitled to a New York Times profile that glosses over her rudeness.
And it really did. I mean, I have to say, the New York Times surprised me a bit with this profile, and that may sound naive, but they have obviously been trying to prove that they're getting better. I put that in air quotes. They're obviously trying to make some inroads with the right again. And, Ross Douthat is like their podcast star at this point. And, Mark, as well as I do, that Jennifer Welch would be treated as a Christine O'Donnell-like figure if she were on the left, and that's a callback because I think Welch is popular. Here, let me test my theory out on you. I think she's popular because she gets that the Democrats are in a Tea Party moment, and so few other podcasters have understood that yet. So she has kind of sucked all the oxygen out of that hole in the market, and they're left to put up with the rest of the baggage that comes with that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think she's, I'll just say it a slightly different way, but I don't disagree with you. I think she's popular because she's part of that, we're not going to take it anymore. We're not going to sit back. Let's imitate Trump. It's parallel to what Gavin Newsom has done, right, on X and social media, which is to basically say, we're going to simultaneously mimic Trump and parody Trump. We're going to say outrageously mean and personal things. Regarding the New York Times, if I may, they've written two stories that I think are part of what you said, which is they really do seem to be making a self-conscious effort to, on occasion, act like they're not biased. They wrote a long story about the scandal in Minnesota over the stealing of tax dollars by groups largely run by Somali Americans. And then they had a story 2.5 years too late about Joe Biden's failed policy on the border. These are stories that I suspect are being called up by the editors to demonstrate fairness, but then they go and write a profile of someone who, if they were Republican, they would rip apart, but she's a Democrat, so they write something relatively soft and gauzy about her.
That's exactly what they did. And speaking of Charlie, Tim Pool, who's facing some security concerns at his home in West Virginia, spoke out a little bit about what effect the assassination of Charlie Kirk has had on the broader right. So let's go ahead and roll S3 here. This is just from the last couple of days, Tim Pool.
The assassination of Charlie Kirk.
This is from today, actually.
May be the most effective political assassination in our history because of conversations from many prominent individuals. I'm not singling out any one person. There are many people doing this. Turning Point USA has become the perpetrator of the crime against themselves. Turning Point USA would have been the principal organization to help Republicans win the midterms With Charlie Kirk's death, we are now seeing disarray. But the fact now that Turning Point is viewed as the villain by so many people, especially on the right, it's going to hinder their ability to win a midterm. Democrats might actually win. Trump will get impeached. And this means dark days indeed.
So Tim's studio and home, it's kind of a compound outside of Harper's Ferry. He said that a car on December 5th, a car drove onto the property and opened fire. This is all being investigated right now, but he referred to the assassination of Charlie as the most, he said it may end up being the most effective assassination in history in that clip, Mark. And I'm just curious if you've noticed any sense that, or any ways in which there's been a chilling effect. Is that real? Is that yet to come? It's only been, it's been such a short period of time since this happened.
Yeah, look, there have been a lot of canceled events, quietly, privately canceled events. There's also people you and I both know who have kind of a fatalistic attitude, which Charlie, I think, to some extent had, which is to say, you can only take so many precautions. If it's going to happen, unfortunately, it's going to happen. I talked to someone today by coincidence who, I'm not going to be super specific here, but he had his office was in a public office building, not a government building, but there was a government official who had a district office in that building right across the hallway, and he quit his job and went to work someplace else because he didn't want to be in that building because of what happened to Charlie Kirk, switched to a different office building. I will say this also in terms of the impact that the assassination had, which is a point that someone made to me. It's not my point originally, but I don't want to name the person who said it. Charlie was a genius, and he was glue. And now you see all of these fights of Laura Loomer and Tucker and Bannon, Candace, right?
Who I think Tim was alluding to in that clip.
Yeah. So, I mean, Candace and Charlie, I hear so many different things about sort of the status of things between them. But Charlie, Donald Trump always says, when I was president, Putin didn't invade. And then when Biden was president, Putin did. Is it a direct correlation? Who knows? But we can say this, just as Trump can say they didn't invade on his watch. When Charlie was alive, the controversies, the contentiousness with Candace was tamped down. When Charlie was alive, the contentiousness with Tucker and with Nick Fuentes was tamped down. So has this all broken out, at least on X, MAGA on MAGA action? Has this broken out because Charlie's not here to keep the peace? I can't say for sure, but I can say the correlation seems pretty exact.
All right, let's move on to Jimmy Kimmel. Because Jimmy Kimmel, we can put the Variety headline up on the screen here. It was announced, a deal that apparently happened in the summer. Variety broke the news today that Jimmy Kimmel Live has a new deal with Disney that's going to keep him on air for another year, quote, according to 3 people familiar with the matter. Kimmel's current deal, everyone may remember, with Disney was believed to expire in 2026. Now, Kimmel announced it this afternoon, but what's odd is that Variety says the deal was inked over the summer, Mark, and over the summer that would be before Kimmel was caught up in that controversy with Brendan Carr over at the FCC over his comments about Charlie Kirk, implying as the predicate for a joke that his killer was on the right, was a MAGA person, joking, of course, that everybody remembers this, but basically that the right was trying to do everything to deflect away from the possibility that the shooter was MAGA. And now we see polling. A lot of Democrats many Democrats actually do believe that the shooter of Charlie Kirk was MAGA. What's going on with this, Mark?
Well, first of all, I like the fact that you used the classic Variety word, inked.
Yes.
Let me ask you this. Is Kimmel back on all the ABC affiliates? Is he back on the Sinclair stations?
My memory is that they did put him back on within a couple of weeks. Yeah.
I mean, he's late night ratings are down, but Kimmel still makes money, I believe, for Disney. And in Hollywood, box office is boffo. Box office is supreme. So if the stations are clearing the show, they're airing the show, And if he's making money, they're going to put him back on. Let's see what the president says, and let's see if he says stuff that's beyond the pale again. But I'm not surprised, because that piece of real estate is very hard to program, and the networks don't want to give it back to the affiliates and give up the revenue. So if Kimmel's got some following, and he does, not surprised they're trying to salvage him.
Do you think in any way this is good news for Stephen Colbert? Is there any hope that the Colbert reversal, which, by the way, people forget, that was that was the entire show. It wasn't just Colbert getting axed. They axed the Late Show. Yeah.
I don't think Colbert makes money. Again, this is my impression from talking to people. I don't have rock solid reporting, but I think
Puck reported this. Puck reported his show is losing a lot of money.
Yeah. It's been reported a few places. It sounds right to me. And Kimmel makes money. So again, Hollywood cares about very little, but one thing they care about is money.
Yeah, well, that's a non-controversial point, Mark, to be sure. Did you catch the president's comments about CBS/Paramount, I suppose, but he was on the Kennedy Center red carpet. He hosted the Kennedy Center Honors, which is just peak Trump. I say that about everything, but the man hosted the Kennedy Center Honors.
It's peakiest Trump.
It is. I mean, he's 79. He's the president of the United States, and he couldn't resist hosting the Kennedy Center Honors, which is... He's clearly the best host for that job. I can't think of anybody who would be more entertaining to watch hosting the Kennedy Center Honors. But he said on the red carpet that he was asked about merger news and all of that. But he was also talking. He kind of went off on CBS, and I think he posted on Truth Social. He's posted a lot today. I'm on his Truth Social right now. There are a lot of posts, but I think he posted that he thinks at this point CBS may actually be worse than before the Ellison ownership transfer. Did you see that, Mark? What do you make of that?
Yeah. I wonder how real it is, right? Because I think it's pretty clear. I mean, look, I'm sure he was annoyed by 60 Minutes because they gave his now frenemy Marjorie Taylor Greene a glowing profile. But there's also an incentive for him, now that it was revealed that Jared Kushner is involved in the Paramount bid for Warner. He's got an incentive to not let people say he's all pro-Ellison. Mm-hmm. So by attacking CBS, by saying Ellison's not changed CBS, I think it takes the edge off of the notion that he's simply trying to rig this for the Ellisons. That's a theory that lots of people are positing. He doesn't like negative coverage, and he doesn't understand why people who like him give him negative coverage sometimes. And he associates that both with individual reporters. If they seem to get along with him, he thinks they should just do positive stories. And he does it with organizations like Paramount, too.
Yeah, so here's the post. He said, my real problem with the show was not Marjorie Taylor Greene. He says, my real problem with the show, however, wasn't the low IQ trader. It was that the new ownership of 60 Minutes Paramount would allow a show like this to air. Yep. They are no better than the old ownership who just paid me millions of dollars for fake reporting about your favorite president, me. Since they bought it, 60 Minutes has actually gotten worse. I like your theory, Mark, that there's something performative about this that could potentially shield him, because when I was thinking about his comments on the red carpet at the Kennedy Center Honors, he was asked about the proposed Netflix Warner Brothers merger, which now could also be could also involve this hostile purchase from the Ellisons. It's like an insane mess right now, and Trump said that he will be involved in the deal as it goes through the FTC, of course. So is that the kind of bigger pictures that Trump right now is almost playing the Godfather in the big media deal, wheeling and dealing?
Right. I mean, he's interested in it. On Squawk Box this morning, Joe Kernan and Andrew Ross Sorkin kind of fought about this, because Joe's view is he was only saying what everybody already knew, so what's the big deal? Of course he's going to be involved, very interested in the outcome. This is an incredible story. It's a story about Hollywood brands and a story about, technological consolidation and the streaming wars, but it's also a big political story. How many times do you see Donald Trump and Elizabeth Warren potentially on the same side, opposing Netflix consolidating all the streaming dominance? But that's where we are right now. We don't know exactly where the president will end up, but he seems to have been favorable towards Netflix, towards Paramount. And yet he's also said very nice things in the last couple of days about the guy who runs Netflix, who has been courting him assiduously. So My guess is that, again, it's not my theory. It's the theory of some of my sources who are close Trump watchers. My guess is he wants Paramount to win this thing, but that he's, as always with Trump, he's playing the angles, keeping his options open, surveying the terrain, and waiting to see what happens.
Yeah, the Supreme Court obviously today was considering the FTC firing ability of the president, which is maybe the hinge case in the Trump administration's effort to implement what's called unitary executive theory. But actually, this is testing the precedent set back in the Roosevelt administration, the hero of the Democratic Party, FDR, who did want to consolidate a lot of power in the executive and sort of streamline the bureaucracy rather than having these quote unquote like independent agencies as we think of them now, like the FTC. Trump is essentially saying, I guess it's kind of soft power to say I'll be involved in the deal. But if the Supreme Court overturns Humphrey's executor, which sort of a lot of people read into the oral arguments today, Mark, then he might have even more wheeling and dealing power going forward.
Yeah, I'm not usually a fan of reading into the oral arguments where the justices are going to end up. But in this case, it was so overwhelming. You had the 6 Republican-picked justices pretty clearly on the side of saying, yeah, the old law that said, the old precedent that said presidents can't fire agency leaders, it's just outdated because things have changed so much. So I'd be pretty surprised after the oral arguments if that position got fewer than the 5 votes needed, and probably will get 6. And it will give the president quite a bit of power to remake these agencies, which historically have there's been a lag. A Republican comes in and the Democratic appointees get to stick around, and that dilutes the power of the new president. The Supreme Court looks to be on the verge of saying, no, if the new president comes in and wants to remake these agencies, he or she can do it.
Yeah, could be on the cusp of that. All right, we have more with Mark Halperin coming up in just a minute. First, remember, a fresh start is possible. Debt can feel like it's getting worse every month, but that only continues if nothing changes. PDS Debt has already helped hundreds of thousands of people rewrite their financial story and take back control, and your turn can start right now. If you're struggling with credit cards, personal loans, or medical bills, PDS Debt creates personalized options to help you get out of debt. They look beyond the numbers to understand your situation and build a plan that's designed specifically for you. There's no minimum credit score, and their entire mission is to help you save more, pay off debt faster, and finally put money back where it belongs, in your pocket. They're A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, have thousands of 5-star Google reviews, and hold a 5-star rating on Trustpilot because their approach works. And the longer you wait, the more interest and fees pile up. So the best time to start was yesterday. The next best time is right now. If I needed this product, it is definitely what I would use. So don't wait another month. Change your story in 30 seconds. Get your free personalized assessment and the best option for you at pdsdebt.com/Emily. That's pdsdebt.com/Emily. pdsdebt.com/Emily. All right, we are back now with Mark Halperin, who is host of Two-Way, editor-in-chief of Two-Way, and host of Next Up with Mark Halperin on Megyn Kelly's MK Media. Also host of Two-Way. You're an editor/host, right, Mark?
I do a little editing, a little hosting, then a little more editing, then a little more hosting.
Yeah, that's all you could ask. That's all you could ask. All right. I want to, speaking of fresh starts, I want to talk to you about Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is not off to a fresh start because Donald Trump is referring to her as Marjorie Trader Brown, because when grass is no longer fresh, it goes brown. This is his reasoning, not mine. But MTG was on with Lesley Stahl on 60 Minutes last night. We were talking earlier in the show about how Donald Trump reacted to that by saying CBS is not even where it was before the merger and what might explain all of that. This seemed to have really set him off, even though MTG kind of understood her appearance would probably set Trump off and was still very MTG. Let's go ahead and take a look at S1.
It's the most toxic political culture, and it's not helping the American people.
But you contributed to that. You were out there pounding, insulting people.
Lesley, you've contributed to it as well with your own. Yes, you're accusatory, just like you did just then.
I know you're accusing me, but I'm smiling.
You're accusing me.
I am accusing you.
But we don't have to accuse one another.
I want you to respond to what you have done in terms of insulting people, yelling at people, and then saying...
I'd like for you to respond for that.
I don't...
No, you can respond to that.
I don't insult people.
You do, in the way you question, and you're accusing me right now.
I was thinking about this, Mark. I'm curious for your take. Marjorie Taylor Greene is stylistically a very post-Trump type politician. Lesley Stahl is very much a pre-Trump style journalist. Lesley Stahl casts a lot of doubt on the ability to verify the Hunter Biden laptop. She has said all kinds of things in the past about Trump that his supporters, I'm sure, interpreted as digs at them as well. It's more polite, but I don't know that it's necessarily been more helpful to like healing the divides in the country, Mark. But what did you think of that?
No, I mean, look, I'm a very forgiving person, and just because Lesley Stahl has done some things that I look at as wrong doesn't mean I'm not open to her, doing her job and doing some great interviews. But I just don't understand the choice to have her interviewing Marjorie Taylor Greene because of just that exact dynamic. It's not right. It doesn't sit right with me to listen to that conversation of two people just talking past each other on what are really critical issues related to how they've each conducted themselves in the past.
Mm-hmm. And Lesley Stahl, this is a really deep cut, but I found it while I was just prepping for the show today, Mark. I went back to some of the things she said during the Reagan administration and shortly after the Reagan administration. That woman predicted one day we would look back at Ronald Reagan and be baffled as to why he was so popular. I'm paraphrasing the quote. But I think she said that on like Bob Costa's show in 1988, somewhere around there. She has not had the best crystal ball.
No, I mean, she's just a classic, liberal television correspondent masquerading as an objective journalist. And it's just obvious to tens of millions of Americans who, again, wonder why the most fabled and highest rated TV news show in the history of North America is populated by correspondents who just are hostile to conservatives. It's just kind of baffling for a lot of people in America.
She also, I saw another quote, she was on with like Bill Moyer. And again, this is someone who's seen as a straight, neutral journalist. This was right after the Reagan administration. I think Moyer asked if she missed Ronald Reagan. And I think she said, as a television journalist, yes. As an American citizen, no. And then went on to, keep covering politics for decades afterwards. And nobody's supposed to bat an eye. But What grates me is her talking to somebody who's very much a product of the environment that Lesley Stahl helped create, which is people feeling like they're being lied to straight to the camera year after year by people who purported to be neutral, but were bringing their own values that are not neutral to the table. And that, to me, I'm not asking you necessarily to weigh in on this, Mark, but I'm just saying, to me, that feels more insidious.
Yeah, no, I'll weigh in on it. Again, I think it's in the view of many people whose views I value, it's the biggest reason Donald Trump won both in 2016 and 2024. This masquerade ball of allegedly objective journalists doing things like covering up for Joe Biden. Would have been a great 60 Minutes piece to do in 2022 about the fact that Joe Biden never talked to the media and never had cabinet meetings and never was rarely doing events late at night. That would have been a great investigative piece by 60 Minutes, but they didn't do it.
And Lesley Stahl has instead been, at events talking about how worried she is about the press and all of that under Trump. So, Mark, what is your take on whether CBS has changed, or how CBS has changed, whether it's changed since the Ellison, Free Press, Barry Weiss takeover? How do you think it's been?
Too soon to say.
Yeah. Okay.
There's some limited data, but I don't think we know yet. But I'm a big fan of Barry's, and I think it will change. I think it will become less liberally biased, but I think it's hard to make that judgment now. Barry doesn't want a network that is pro-Trump or pro-Republican or pro-MAGA. She wants a network that's fair and where all points of view are represented. So that means there will be stories on the Barry Weiss CBS News that the president doesn't like. She's not going to be a propaganda network. She's going to a fair network.
It looks like Status just broke that Tony DeCopel is going to be the next anchor of CBS Evening News. Obviously, Norah O'Donnell stepped down from that. Sounds like maybe O'Donnell wanted to go back into that role. What do you make of DeCopel getting this role? He very prominently, and people will immediately remember this in the context of the Barry Weiss conversation, stepped in and slammed Ta-Nehisi Coates. Or I would say did an appropriately critical interview with Ta-Nehisi Coates, though it was one that you definitely felt where DeCopel stood on it coming through.
Yeah.
What do you make of it?
I mean, he's a relatively young guy for that job. If you look at history, he's been doing the morning show, and that one interview set him apart from most people because, as you said, it wasn't some revolutionary or what's the word, revelatory moment. He just asked the guy some tough questions, but in the context of liberal morning shows, it stood out. And I wish him luck because it's been a long time since anyone's had that job for CBS in the evening and been able to get significant ratings. So he's going to have to break the jinx if he's going to do well.
All right, back to the Marjorie Taylor Greene of it all. So in this interview, Stahl is basically grilling her on what changed, what the president has said to her. Marjorie Taylor Greene refused actually to share the message that she got from President Trump because she said it was so nasty. She said J.D. Vance, when she sent J.D. Vance the same message she sent Trump about threats towards her son, since she had this divorce with Donald Trump politically, J.D. Vance said that they would look into it. Trump sent her back something that she said was so nasty she didn't even want to share it. So now that we are approaching, I guess, roughly the last month here of Marjorie Taylor Greene's tenure in Congress, where does she stand, Mark?
Well, I think it's as open now as it was the Friday night last week before last when she announced she was going. This could range anywhere from we never hear from her again unless we happen to take a CrossFit class in Georgia, or she could, try to become a key player in national politics, or at least in statewide Georgia politics. My instinct, my spidey sense says it's going to be more the former, that she enjoyed a pretty good ride as being close to the president, but sheared from his force field, I think it's going to be difficult for her to enjoy the kind of recognition and power and influence that she had.
What do you think this has done, if anything, to the MTG wing of MAGA? Because she's not alone. I don't know exactly how big the numbers are, but she's not alone of people in MAGA who, from the populist right, are concerned about the Trump administration. Now, the way she's handled it by going on 60 Minutes and The View and CNN to take shots at the president was quite obviously ill-advised. I don't think in her case that it reflects some desire to be loved by the liberal media. I don't think if she wanted to be loved by the liberal media, she would be taking those shots at Lesley Stahl or the ladies on The View. I mean, she's gotten some really good digs in The View and at Lesley Stahl there in that last clip. But that is what a lot of Trump people are saying. They're looking at this. They're very suspicious of her motives, and I guess I don't blame them.
Yeah, I mean, she's never going to be a favorite of people on the left. I don't think it really does much for MAGA grassroots. I think elite people, like people in public life and elective office, I think will take from this that if you cross the president, it could cost you your job. And so there was never much enthusiasm for going after Donald Trump or to stand up to him in public. But I think to the extent that there had been kind of burblings on things like Epstein and some of the other issues, I think it's going to be less likely, but not impossible, particularly for more established Republicans who are more likely to be standing up to him now on things like what's going on at the Pentagon. I think MAGA Republicans will see this as a warning that your power, if you're a MAGA Republican, emanates from His Majesty as opposed to your own connection to the grassroots.
Right, and it's not, it doesn't matter if you are kind of grassroots MAGA, which is different than, of course, as you were just saying, that's different than in the past when it's been a kind of establishment Republican breaking with Trump. It's different when it's MAGA, and I guess the answer that we're getting here is it doesn't matter. He's in charge. He is MAGA. He sets the terms.
Yep, that's why I call him His Majesty.
His Majesty. Okay, before I let you go, Mark, So the Marjorie Taylor Greene of it all. Yeah. She, do you think she could have a lot of success? I mean, you mentioned potentially wanting to go into Georgia politics. Do you think there's something down the road for Marjorie Taylor Greene that's viable, or has she kind of burned the bridges? What does it look like going forward?
I think she's burned them again. I think she could run an outstanding CrossFit outlet in the right city in Georgia, but I'm skeptical that she's going to have the capacity without the support of the president, and I doubt she'd ever have it again, to build what she would need to build to have a successful, really powerful independent career. But she could try, but I'm skeptical of it because so much of her prominence, her energy, her mojo derived from her association with the president and the movement.
Now, Nancy Mace penned a scathing op-ed in the New York Times today, taking on House Speaker Mike Johnson. We've heard Lesley Stahl go after Mike Johnson. We've heard Marjorie Taylor Greene go after Mike Johnson. Not the best look for the ladies of the House GOP conference, I will say that. But I've heard people who share substantive criticisms. I was surprised at actually the level of substance in the Nancy Mace New York Times op-ed, to be honest. So that dovetailed with a Jake Sherman report that some 20 Republicans could be considering retirement in the midterm. I'm curious, Mark, if you've heard the same rumblings.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks, which is when we typically see retirements. Now, if it's a Republican retiring in a ruby red district, then they'll be replaced by another Republican. But it does show the mindset that they think they're going to be in the minority, which is no fun. And so for a lot of members who may well retire, whether they serve out their term or not, the thought of coming back to being in the minority rather than go and spend time with grandkids or getting one last burst of private sector activity in, just the mismatch in terms of what's appealing and what's not is pretty clear.
And do you think there was a demoralization, or is there a demoralization happening? Because I do think with Stefanik, there's a lot more going on. She's salty about what happened with her in leadership after the UN ambassador gig was pulled out from under her. And then with Nancy Mace, there's just so much going on that we can't even begin to scratch the surface of what is going on. And Marjorie Taylor Greene has these populist kind of critiques of Trump. Are you hearing this outside of those three?
There's some others, but I think, in looking at them case by case, they're a little bit idiosyncratic. There's some overlap, but it's mostly each of them has their own complaints, their own grievances, and Speaker Johnson is done a miraculous job so far, but at some point you run out of rope with some of these issues and some of these people, and for him, unfortunately for him, it's happened with a lot of high-profile people in a very short period of time.
Mark, I thought this is where we were going with the interview. I don't know if you saw this video at National Airport of HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. today.
Played this on my show today, too. It's very compelling, although I prefer the Sean Duffy.
So who do you think did it better? Who did it best?
Duffy. I mean, Kennedy's head barely got to the bar. Duffy's sort of the bar. And I think Duffy wears a 31 waist. The guy's just tiny.
Someone in the chat is asking how much you bench. You don't have to tell us, Mark, but let it be known that people are wondering.
I'm more of a curl guy.
More of a curl guy. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll let you get back to the curls, Mark. Mark is editor-in-chief of Two Way, host of Next Up with Mark Halperin on the MK Media Network from Megyn Kelly. Thank you so much for taking time tonight, Mark. Really appreciate it.
Ho, ho, ho. Happy holidays. Thank you for hosting me.
Yes, anytime. All right, quick break, and then we'll be right back with more. If you've ever noticed those creepy ads that pop up on your phone and they seem to know exactly where you've been, what you've bought, even what you've been talking about, you've probably asked yourself, is my phone monitoring me? Yes, is the answer to that. Your instinct is correct. The truth is your smartphone is constantly collecting and leaking data without your knowledge or your consent. Every day it builds a detailed profile of your life, your information, your location, your habits, your interests, even the people you communicate with. That information is then funneled into an invisible marketplace where it's tracked, analyzed, and sold to the highest bidder, which, by the way, sometimes is the government itself. Keep that in mind. And it's not just annoying, it's invasive. It's happening all the time. But the Up Phone by Unplugged, I have it right here in my hand, you can see what it looks like, is different. It's designed to protect your privacy from the ground up. No hidden trackers, no data mining, just a secure, streamlined smartphone experience that puts you back in control. Whether you're texting, browsing, or using apps, the Up Phone ensures your personal information stays personal. It's the phone for people who are done being watched. And I have to say, when you start using this thing, it is so slick. So if you're ready to take back your digital privacy, visit unplugged.com/Emily and get $25 off a phone case with the purchase of a phone. Learn more and order your Up Phone today. And again, this is my Up Phone right here in my hands. And it's unplugged.com/Emily. That's where you can learn more. That's the link. You can order your Up Phone there. Unplugged.com/Emily, because your life should be yours and not theirs. All right. As you probably gleaned from the last segment, I am in the chat. I decided to just pull it up tonight. So I'm looking at what all of you are saying. Let it be known, I'm looking at what all of you are saying. Of course, I'm not able to track every every comment. But someone says here, that's the first time I've seen Emily acknowledge the chat. Anytime we have a pre-recorded interview, I'm always in the chat. I'm always hanging out with you guys because I have nothing else to do, frankly, when we have a pre-recorded interview, and you guys are going to hang. So thanks for being in the chat. Appreciate it. I'll take questions if we have time. I did want to get to this clip of Tish Hyman, who you probably remember. I mean, Megan covered this story a lot, and with good reason, because Tish Hyman is a singer and made a lot of news recently. She's been asking Eric Swalwell questions. She just asked, I think it was yesterday, Khanna questions. And you probably remember Tish Hyman from the big gym controversy. Hyman is the Gold's Gym in Beverly Hills. You remember this? This was just like, it was last month and the month before. Time has no meaning anymore. But there's a convicted domestic abuser transitioning in the locker room with Tish Hyman. Tish Hyman has filed complaints against this convicted abuser in the women's locker room, accused the abuser of exposing himself, harassing her in the locker room. Just a crazy story. And Hyman has clearly just been overwhelmed with the emotions that come along with this type of experience. Especially, Tish Hyman is not your typical GOP voter, and had this experience, has been refusing to stay silent about it, and went to a town hall, a Khanna town hall. And I have to say, I know Khanna, I like Khanna, and the reason I find this story to be so interesting is that Khanna has tried to bring the Democratic Party, to help the Democratic Party transcend the culture war, no pun intended, with the transcend language. But really, that's what Roe has tried to do, is said, if Democrats talk about populist, affordability, meat and potatoes type issues, he did that before, of course, the Zoran campaign. He's Bernie aligned, and comes to it from that vantage point after 2024. Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez went on their fighting oligarchy tour in red states, red areas, at some of the stops. And, they were bringing out pretty big crowds, and they were not talking about the culture war. That won't surprise you at all, but it's very different than the Sanders campaign in 2020, or the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The language that she was using, the sort of faculty lounge language that she was using all of the time. Now, I'm not talking about whether their beliefs have changed, but I am saying that Roe, congressman obviously from Silicon Valley, one of the wealthiest districts in the entire country, talks about that all of the time, and is not afraid to tell his donors basically where to shove it. He's tried to be kind of a voice of reason on culture war issues, and to have to lead with affordability, meat, potatoes, kind of populist issues, fighting oligarchy, all that type of stuff. Here's what happened when yesterday Tish Hyman confronted Khanna on the trans question at a town hall.
If you're going to vote for anyone, make sure that they're standing up for women's rights, because they're not. And if you're not aware, we are unprotected. Go in the bathroom right now, there could be a man in there. He says, I'm a woman, and that's okay. Now, I know none of you think that's okay. Thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate you sharing your perspective. I certainly believe in safety, and I also believe that in this country we recognize the dignity and rights of every person to pursue happiness.
They are men. You need to stop with the malarkey. They're men. Stop making excuses for grown men going in women's restrooms. I'll hand it up to him. You're calmly lying and saying that it's okay. That's what you're saying. When you say that, you're saying it's okay. And I need you to say it's not okay for men to be in a women's locker room.
All right, so this clip is really instructive because it tests one of my central political theories, which is that the trans issue, when it comes up, is a litmus test for swing voters on the credibility, integrity of a candidate in question, because the vast majority of Americans do not believe, and I mean, we're talking the vast majority of Americans, do not believe that Tish Hyman should have to share a locker room with a domestic abuser man exposing himself and the like. definitely nobody believes that a Gold's Gym should make life hard for Tish Hyman when she talks about what happened to her and tries to prevent it from happening again or to other people. But more importantly, your average swing voter, and certainly your average Republican voter, does not believe that men and women are interchangeable and that a man who transitions literally becomes a woman because he has literally aligned himself, as they will argue, with his biological mental sex. Right? Again, this is the argument that you hear. Most Americans do not buy it, and that's because it's logically ridiculous. It's not true. And I'm happy to talk to people who believe that it's true. I think they have interesting theories about sex and gender. I think they're pretty clearly wrong. I think this is politically toxic. I think it's an esoteric, like, faculty lounge conversation that used to be gripping because it kind of tested what we thought we knew about sex and gender. And it's, I was going to say fun to read Judith Butler, but it's absolute hell to read Judith Butler. So I'm glad I caught myself before misspeaking. But, you're going back to de Beauvoir and reading Foucault and gender performativity from Butler and all of those people, that used to be where this was confined to. And then it escaped the lab setting and everybody saw it for what it was. And when elected Democrats are unable to just say a simple thing, even though this issue is not what most people are voting on, I think it's almost an insurmountable hurdle with, it's not true in every race, but I'm just saying this as a kind of general rule. I really think it's almost an insurmountable hurdle with many swing voters in tight races where Republicans play up this issue and make voters think about the issue. And I don't mean play up in a Republicans pounce or seize type of way, because I think it should be an issue, because I think women are going to be affected by these policies that Democrats, in my opinion, are very much on the wrong side of. So I don't begrudge, I'm not saying Republicans are exploiting it, but when they, I think rather cleverly, force Democrats to confront this, like with the Kamalas for they, them ad. But this has happened in states around the country. And races around the country, when they force Democrats to confront that issue and talk about it, I think it does really become a litmus test for a lot of swing voters, because it looks like people are lying. It looks like Democrats are lying. Like they're telling you something that they don't fully believe, that doesn't reflect their deeply held beliefs. And it just feels like they're lying or dancing around the truth for the sake of special interest groups. So it's not just that everyone is going out to vote on trans issues, and it's not just that this is an issue, because Americans actually have complicated views on whether adults should be able to transition and the reality of gender dysphoria and all of that. But when you're talking about men and women's locker rooms, boys and girls sports, these are roughly 80-20 issues. And if a Democrat's not willing to say this stuff is wrong, full stop, because men cannot become women, that is, I really think, a litmus test. And I don't know, I haven't talked to Roe about whether he's thinking about running in 2028. I think this would be, I'm sure there are people in conference rooms, like over at in Democratic campaigns as they're building right now, trying to figure out, and maybe James Talrico and Jasmine Crockett are among them, but trying to figure out how to talk about this issue in a way that doesn't alienate voters and doesn't become a sort of central litmus test believability issue. Because this, again, I just think it's so powerful, because you can bet Republicans, maybe some Dem primaries, we'll see, but you can bet Republicans are going to play this up with every Democrat who doesn't commit to ending the madness of putting men in women's prisons. That's something that happens at a fairly large scale in California, putting men in women's shelters, as has happened in Alaska and other places, putting men in women's locker rooms, boys and girls sports, which has happened virtually everywhere. Democrats need a sense of moral clarity on this issue, and it has to be based on what they actually believe. Otherwise, it will be a litmus test for many, many voters, probably too many voters. Now, Roe isn't really in a swing district, so he's not at risk. But I just think that interaction with Tish Hyman, again, who is far from your average GOP voter, where Tish Hyman's like bubbling over the top, boiling over with anger because of what she experienced. I think that really resonates, and I think it's better for the country, to be honest, if Democrats from Roe to James Talarico to Seth Moulton and Gavin Newsom can just come down with some moral clarity and say men cannot become biological, literal women, and we are not going to encourage laws that treat sex in that way because it sets women back and it puts women in danger. And it's just wrong. It's just wrong. So, some thoughts on Tish Hyman's interesting confrontation with Ro Khanna in that clip, because I do find it to be something that is going to be confronted now that the midterm cycle is, oh man, I keep saying we're like a month away. All right, so I am looking at the chat right now, by the way. Looking at the chat right now. A lot of nice things. It's okay if they're not nice, but just before we go, I'll take a question or two in here. Some of these are funny. Did the brim of her hat get caught in bicycle spokes? This is from Rideshare Beware. No, I don't know, actually. Shortly after I got this hat, I noticed that it had been ripped and torn up, and I actually don't know how that happened. This is the most expensive hat I own. It's like a completely ridiculous purchase, but I found myself in Aspen over the summer with no baseball hat, and that's how I ended up with a baseball hat that I'm so ashamed it costs this much money. But anyway, 15 years ago, a man would be registered, Barry says, as a sex offender for undressing in a woman's locker room. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Let's see what else we got here. Can that lady run for Congress, please, says Glenn about Tish Hyman. If Tish Hyman wanted a political future, Tish Hyman could definitely have a political future. I mean, just I think one of the reasons Hyman has been so viral is that the emotion is so obviously authentic and the story is so powerful that to see the rage bubbling over the surface to the point where Hyman actually is clearly having to muster some discipline to restrain herself, and doing it. That's the other thing, right? Like Hyman actually is restraining herself. That's, I think, pretty powerful. So if she wanted to do something, she probably could do something politically. It could do something in media. There's a lot could come from Tish Hyman. All right. So that's enough. Thanks for getting in the comments tonight. That was fun. We had a little time, so I had fun with it. All right. We will be back with more After Party on Wednesday. Make sure to subscribe on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Check out that Reason debate on Big Tech that Ryan Grimm and I are going to be doing on Wednesday in the D.C. area. You can get tickets on the Reason website to that. And have a great evening, everyone. Look forward to being back here with the great Maureen Callahan. Oh, that's going to be so exciting. I have a built-up list of questions for Maureen on Wednesday. So we will see you then. Have a great night, everyone.